Welcome to the Never Been Promoted podcast and YouTube channel. I'm on a mission to help you cut the tie to all the things that are holding you back so you can unleash your entrepreneur. Hey, welcome to Never Been Promoted. Hi, I'm your host, Thomas Helfrich. We are on a mission here at Never Been Promoted to help entrepreneurs get better at entrepreneurship by cutting the ties to all the kind of shit holding them back. That's right. There's lots of things that hold you back in life. People, thinking, entitlements, scared, fear, all of it. There's so much. And as an entrepreneur, all these things become incredibly highlighted and amplified because you have to kind of do it. You know, and then oftentimes you feel like you got to do it alone. A lot of times you feel alone. But we're here to tell you that you really are not alone. There's lots of entrepreneurs going through this, and that's the whole point, is to learn from their stories. Today, we're going to be joined by Matt Morstad. He is the founder of GSD, I think GSD, how was that right? Nation. But he has a cool podcast. I think Programming Lions is pretty high ranked. It's top 10, or it's top 10% global, and I think a 29 listening score in a pretty short time. So I'm looking forward to this conversation of how he went from corporate America to being a podcaster, like with his kids. So imagine that, like that conversation at home. I can't wait to hear it, how that went. By the way, honey, I know I was making lots of money and I was comfortable, but we're going to be a podcast family now. It's going to be great. The conversation's going to be awesome. All right. I have one call to action. If you don't mind, go to neverbeenpromoted.com. Actually, you know what's changed that? Don't go to neverbeenpromoted.com. By the time you might hear this on the podcast, we have cutthetie.com. It's coming out. It's our community. It's launched as a free one on Facebook right now. And then the masterminds and larger private community will be on school as in cut-the-tie. But check out cutthetie.com. Lots of information there. All right. Enough shameless plugs. Let's bring in Matt. Matt, how are you?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. We're gonna dive into this. I can't wait. We're not going to have this conversation quite yet. Okay. I am looking forward to the conversation of, hey, by the way, we're going to become a podcast family.
Yeah.
So, do you want to take a minute, introduce yourself, and just where you're from? That is the brick real, and how do you have such glorious hair?
Yeah. This it is real. That's the part of the structure of my home. So the brick is real. My name is Matt Morstad. I'm the founder of GSD Nation, as you mentioned, and it's a social media brand and podcast that I run with my children, focused on building a resilient and productive next generation, particularly with Gen Alpha, which my two boys are. Yeah. Historically, I worked 25 years in corporate America. I'm an engineer by education, business degree. I ran major parts of the last organization I was at. I was there for about a decade, went through hyper growth, and so have a lot of lessons learned about how to be productive in a hyper growth situation and make the most out of your time. But ultimately, I made this difficult choice to switch over, as you said, we'll get into it, to doing a podcast and really focusing on my family and my kids and making sure that they are resilient young men as they grow up.
Yeah, and you, what is Generation Alpha's range? Like, how old are your kids?
2011, I believe, is the cutoff for Gen Alpha. So it would be children 13 and younger right now, and then I believe this year starts Gen Beta. I don't know if I'd want to be a part of Gen Beta, but
I know, because like if you say, hey, they're masters at Anyway,
Um,
um, that's the master beta group.
Master beta, yes, it
You
could
know,
be.
master alpha sounds cool. Like, man, that guy
Yeah,
must be wow. But a master beta group.
yeah,
Maybe they should call them Omega because it is the last one. We should stop labeling people.
yeah. I suspect they'll change the name because that's not too.
I don't know. There's some pretty dumb people in the world that do stuff like this. So I have some alphas as well. I have a son and daughter in that range. What is a
Okay,
15-year-old? Is that still Gen Z?
that would be Gen Z, but kind of
Oh,
the
wow.
tail
She's
end of
the end
Gen
of
Z.
Gen Z.
Hmm.
Oh, my word. That poor lady is going to have a
Hmm.
tough time identifying with that because,
Yes.
Gen
Well,
Z. I have a different opinion of most Gen Xers. You're a Gen Xer
yeah.
as a Gen Z. Um, if you give them the right environment, they do awesome. My whole team's is effectively Gen Z. Maybe a millennial sprinkled in there that feels Gen Z-ish, but they
Right.
do awesome. And I have concern that the alpha group went through a couple years because of COVID, right?
Right.
Of desocialization. I think they'll grow out of that, but they'll remember that isolation to some
Yes.
degree. And maybe it's the independence they gained during the time, or how to
Yeah.
be in your own thoughts. But I like what you're doing with that. I think I look forward to this conversation of how you're helping them and how your kids. My kids, I don't know if I could trust my kids to show up every week and be good stewards of a business.
Yeah.
So
It's tricky. It's tricky.
we'll get
So
into that. Like this
yeah.
week's, they've lost permissions. They're all grounded. So I'm here solo this week.
Yeah.
Like that's how every week would go for me.
Yeah, yeah, they're yeah, the dependability of Gen Alpha employees is tricky, but we've made it work, and yeah, happy to get into some of the things, the tricks and uh, stuff that we've done to make that work.
Well, as a fellow podcaster, I appreciate your audio and mic setup.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Well, yes, we
I'm not
and
kidding.
Lighting, and yeah, you got to
Sometimes
have
you
all
bring on
the
people that don't sound great and
yeah.
don't have a consideration for cleaning the room. So I'm just gonna say thank
I've
you.
seen it. I've had the same thing happen. We've got approximately 65 episodes published. We put out one a week, and yeah, I've had mixed experiences with people and their computer mics and lighting, and sometimes it looks like a witness protection program because they have light coming behind them, and so I have to kind of work through that with them. But yeah, so hopefully I look and sound good.
It's awesome. Listen. Let's just take a moment here though. Can you start with just before we get into kind of your journey, just what it is your kind of the 90-second pitch or so, and then just back up and start telling your story a bit of how you got there and and why you launched it and things that were hard.
Yeah, I'd say it's a couple of things that happened. One is just the culture of corporate America in a business that was rapidly growing and sort of hit some scale that became maybe a little bit of a misfit for me, coupled with the time of COVID and what I was seeing. You mentioned like the challenges that kids were going through and being isolated and learning at home and wearing masks everywhere and all of this, and what that did to that generation, and just seeing general trends, I'd say, in our culture, and wanting to make sure that my two sons don't fall into that. And so, um, for me, in terms of the corporate world, I was an executive at a publicly traded company, great company, spent a decade there, and let's see, when I started there, it was maybe a couple hundred people, and when I left there, it was a few thousand people. And I was, I'd say, a big part of the growth, and had a great ride. But ultimately, what happens when companies get big, and they go through this phase, is things become less efficient. You start having a lot of meetings for meeting's sake, and I was always like a builder mindset. Keep my head down, build stuff, create stuff, get stuff to market. But maintaining the machine of what we built was not as interesting for me, and so I just found myself to not be as good of a fit for that. And so we had like good candid discussions with the leadership team there, and we developed a good transition plan. I hired some of my replacements, and then I worked on some more like entrepreneurial things within the business, like mergers and acquisitions for a while. But ultimately, I still found that like the bureaucracy was of a bigger company just wasn't for me. And I think an
Did you say
important part of
unpleasant
that,
or pleasant?
it wasn't for me. And
Oh,
um,
make
I
sure I
think
heard that
for
right.
me, it was important that I could recognize that. Like, I want to be fulfilled and happy with what I'm doing, and it wasn't horrible, but I just felt like I could do more, and I could focus on different things. And so, as part of that, you have to prepare. Like, if you're going to leave a good paying job, You have to prepare accordingly in terms of like having your finances in order. And so we were pretty smart about all that. I started the conversation with my wife very early. The company I was with was great. It was like a year-long transition, hiring my replacements and kind of phasing out of the business because I was managing hundreds of people at one point. And so you have to be thoughtful about it. You can't just, jump right into the deep end. You got to be a little bit thoughtful about it. And at the same time, we were recognizing this cultural pattern with our kids and with other kids. Like I wouldn't probably be the first one that has gone to a restaurant and seen kids at the table just scrolling on iPhones or iPads. I was watching my kids, and every time they had an opportunity to watch YouTube, they just would mindlessly scroll like zombies. And so I did not want my children to fall into this trap of degeneracy. And so I just felt like if I can do the next chapter of my life or my career on more of an entrepreneurial journey and bring my kids with me, wow, like how rewarding would that be? Like how much purpose would I feel in that?
I
And
get it.
not only that, but how much will they learn in terms of building the skills, whether we succeed, whether we fail, whether we have trials, tribulations, and get through that, and the fight that it takes, and all that you learn, it's going to be tremendous for them. So we made this difficult decision of going from good corporate job to zero pay. We're going to start from scratch and create a podcast. And there are reasons that we chose kind of what we did, but that's sort of the background to it. And now we're a year into it, and it's been a blast. Like I've been spending so much time with my kids. There's challenges to it. Sometimes Gen Alpha kids aren't always maybe focused in terms of the business, but we've developed good routines so that we can set specific time so that they can do all the kid stuff and school stuff and sports and all of that. And then we have some isolated pockets of time where we work on the business, but they're enjoying it. We're learning. We're meeting really cool people through our podcast. We're seeing our channel grow. We're seeing what works, what doesn't work. All that stuff that you learn as a podcaster or really in any kind of business. And I just think these are lifelong skills that are going to carry with them. And so,
Oh, for sure.
so we're
Just
pumped. We're having a good
exposure
time.
of, yeah, just explore just the time with them. Like, there's, it could be fishing, it could be golfing, it could be playing board games. You're doing a business like that's um, they're showing up too, right? And so they're showing up to go do the stuff. And you have a great Instagram. I was Instagram one of your better channels too. You have a really nice channel with
Yeah,
that. And
Instagram. So we're at my GSD Nation on Instagram, and that's our biggest social media following. We have around maybe 20,000 followers across the social media, and Instagram is where we have the biggest following. But we post all of our stuff on YouTube,
yeah.
Instagram, all the all the
Well, on your
things.
podcast too, just there's a lot of people who will listen to this that are podcasters as well. Like, what's you don't have to share your download metrics if you don't want to, but I'm like, whatever you can share around how you promote it and what the results have been would be great to hear. And how long you've been going as well.
Yeah, we've been at it for a little bit over a year. We started late 23. We got some of our early episodes out, and they weren't pretty. They were,
They
the
never
sound
are.
quality, the video, that it was not pretty. But this is a great lesson, maybe for entrepreneurs. I did this in business too. Like your first product, you're not going to look back on it and be super proud of your first product ever. Like but you have to get started, and you can spend all the time in the world trying to get the first thing perfect, but what you'll find is like you need that forcing function. Get yourself out there, get yourself started, put yourself in that situation where you're uncomfortable, and you're going to learn. It's actually going to force you to get things done more rapidly and more effectively. So we just decided to jump in. We put stuff out. It wasn't great. We knew we would get better, and so our mindset was we were just going to incrementally get better every single podcast episode in terms of the technical aspects like audio, lighting, etc., and like the questions that we ask, how we develop conversational skills. And so I've definitely seen an improvement over the last year. Even in our in our guest profiles, we're getting, let's say, larger profiles on our podcast, and so that's all exciting. But that's part of the journey that we're learning and that kids are learning, and generally like entrepreneurs should know. I can say, as somebody who was developing products for a company, there was always people that say, well, we got to get it perfect before we put the product out in the market. And I would argue, no, let's get it out, because we're going to find things. The customer is going to give us feedback about things we don't even know about yet. We don't even know that like the button should be here instead of here, or that it works in this way, or I like to wear it here versus here. And so yeah, getting things out, you're going to learn and you're going to be able to iterate faster.
Yeah. When you were first starting, what was kind of the hardest challenge?
With the podcasting,
Well, it wasn't well in any of it really. I mean, it's the whole journey that matters, right? Podcasting, sure if that was the hardest, the other might be like, oh, paying bills was pretty tough. I mean, it could be anything.
well,
Like, what was the
fortunately,
hardest like thing? Like every day or every night, you're like, this is what was keeping you up.
yeah, I think there's always been lingering doubt. Like, oh my gosh, are we doing the right thing? Is this, gosh, like this
Yeah.
is hard. We see how hard and long it takes for people, like people that have a big podcast presence out in the market. You see, they've been at it for 5, 6, 10
20
years in some
years, some of them,
cases.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
some
and
I mean, it's
so
amazing, like, right, just to not to interrupt you, but I think that's a lot of people misses. By the time they've picked it up, they've gone through 500 probably revisions of how they do their show or their content
right,
or their social media channels, and, they've tried everything at that point that's worked, not worked, and they've gone back to the 1 or 2 things that do, anyway, no, I think that's a really good point, though, is that in any business, no matter how many years they've been in, it's not been easy, and in the moment they're looking at, they still don't think they're where they should be.
right.
So anyway,
And there are rare cases that leapfrog in terms of
sure.
their presence, but it's pretty rare. Most people just stick at it and they're consistent over time, and that leads to growth. And so there's a matter of like having the patience and the dedication to do that, getting on a routine, setting the routine. And so I think early on it was a matter of, well, okay, what do we want to talk about? How do we want to? So really setting the strategy and back to sort of the point of like, you just have to get started. I mean, so that's what we did. We said, well, we're going to get started. And if we change our lane in terms of what topics we want to cover or what kind of guests we have on or how long the podcast is, we will just change it. But we got to get started, because if we wait, then,
Yeah.
we're not,
Oh, I
we're not
talk
going to get
about
all that
this.
exercise.
Yeah, no, I talk about something like this a lot with, you may or not. I have a marketing agency, and I have this podcast, and I have a book
Mm-hmm.
coming out called Cut the Tie, which I wrote with the idea of, I wanted to kind of have a raw, what I was thinking while building a company. And as I've met more entrepreneurs in the world, so when my kids read it down the road, they know how daddy was thinking, the challenge he was facing,
Yeah.
why you argue with the spouse or whatever, like all the things that are like how hard it is. And I took a
Mm-hmm.
not so, hurrah, we're going to go make millions. It's like, this is the reality of being an entrepreneur. Here's my story kind of thing, and learn from it. And, and it's, some of it's, taken from other stories of people I've met, but as you go through this, and I love the fact you're focused on one thing. I would tell you that's the scariest piece for me would be, uh, I see what you're doing. I'm like, oh man, I should just focus on it. But then you're like, man, it's got to make money. And so you're like, you really pucker up when
Yeah.
it's there. And I think that's a, and then when you make the pivots, but you're talking about like, should we talk about this? Should we change the show length? Now you're like, but are we getting on? Is that the right thing to do? Is that going to hurt us or help? And like, you're always questioning of how that's going to impact making money, or
Yeah.
you're probably pretty sure it's going to help no matter what on the mission. But then there's that monetary side of, does that actually hurt or help me? I don't know.
Right.
No one can really answer it. Do you want to talk about that? Because I know that's something I went through, and I go
Yeah.
through weekly or even hourly sometimes. And I can't imagine you don't have the
Yeah,
same
that's a fair thing,
challenges.
and different people are in different spots. I would say that I'm very fortunate in terms of like, I wasn't worried about monetizing our channel for the first year to year and a half of what we're doing. My main priority was like getting our kids involved, getting them confident, getting a presence, um,
And
ensuring that they
that ties to your brand, right? It ties to what the whole point is to get
y-
that group. So if you
yeah.
don't do that, you're
Exactly. So that it's important that this is something that they want to do, and I can get into more like like kind of why we went down this route, because the kids did and do want to do this.
Yeah, please tell
Um,
me what, like, as you get down that route. That would be
yeah.
great to hear.
So yeah, I'll just go to that, because now kids in Gen Alpha, Gen Z, if you ask them, or if you see any polls on this, more than 50% of kids in these two generations, the number one job desired by this generation is to be online influencers. So we are in this digital age, digital marketing, presence, building a brand, and then being able to monetize your brand or your community. And so my kids are like a lot of Gen Z, Gen Alpha kids, looking at people being successful online, and they wanted to develop their brand online. And so I said, okay, how do you see that happening? What does that look like? What do you want to do? Oh, we want to be gamers and react to TikToks. I go, okay, no. I'll help you, but only if we do something that has value associated with it.
That's
I
right.
don't want to
Yeah.
be some other brain rot channel out there. I want to do something that has value associated with it. And so, hence, we started the social media channel, and that kind of promotes our podcast. But the podcast itself is where we get to talk to all these guests. And so, the kids are being able to develop interview skills, also talk to experts in their domain or field, and ask them questions. We've had people on from, gosh, politics, athletes, entrepreneurs, coaches, everything. And so it's just such a cool opportunity. And, and I just felt like if I can get them started on this brand building journey early, they're going to have a jump start on other kids their age. And
Oh
so
yeah,
that's
no
really
doubt.
my plan. My sort of like long-term vision is to get this going, have them run with it and take it in whatever direction that they want. But by the time they do that and start owning it on their own, then they will, they'll have a community already. And not 100% of that community is going to follow them in whatever direction that they go, but they're going to have such a head start on others because it is difficult. And you know how this is, like building a community is difficult. It takes time and it takes consistency.
It
And
takes money
so
too.
I want to give them a head start. Yeah, and it takes money. And so we were in a fortunate situation where money isn't really a factor for the first couple of years. Our main priority was building a community, building a brand, and yeah,
Yep.
getting that going before we worry too much about monetizing. And so we're in that phase now where we really would like to start having the business support itself. That's really the goal this year, is to have the business supporting itself, and ultimately like to see to see net profit at the end of the year.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So part of, I'll tell you, our own thing for Never Been Promoted is because I had a company that makes money. We took a funding from that, but also the idea that any dollar that a guest sponsored, I reinvest back into 100% back into the business
Mm-hmm.
of it. And the reason is because I'm not looking in year 1 or 2 here, or even year 3. I'm looking at year 10, year 5
Exactly.
of,
Yeah.
we have 1 million subscribers on YouTube. Well, we did $20,000 of advertising in March last year, and we got to 1 million subscribers via advertising
Yeah.
because but that gives more exposure to all the people here. And then we're like, okay, maybe we chose the wrong markets for that. So now we're advertising with a slower subscriber rate, but it's more US English speaking stuff. And so, the point is you learn from where you spend dollars and do
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
But the reinvestment from a business standpoint makes sense because, as you know, I know, if you build the community, then monetizing it becomes much easier because you'll have a focused community that needs things, wants things, and trusts you.
Right.
So I think one of the advice, I was talking to, I'm not sure if people will hear this, but we're going to Podfest to present that monetization model because we monetized on the first podcast. Before we'd even
That's
recorded,
incredible.
we'd already collected $300. And the reason is because we sold on the idea of value.
Mm-hmm.
And you're spot on that if you're going to be helping kids create a brand, they need to be value and not something that's just going to be like they're going to get bored with reacting because they found it funny for the last 3 weeks on TikTok or YouTube.
Yeah.
And having that value centric thing allows it'll allow you to monetize faster, it'll allow you to grow a brand faster because it has value.
Right.
The value you guys are doing is if you had to summarize it, right? You could anything. Okay, let me back up. So people should focus, I think, kids in particular, where your passion is, where your proficiency is, so a talent, if you will, or something can be developed, and where there's impact. And impact can be translates into profit and other things, right?
Yeah.
If you don't have a passion for what they, if somebody doesn't, and they don't have any talent, you can't ever really make impact. You just can't, because you'll burn out or you're just not good enough. And so part of what I'll ask you is like, where does that overlie for you? And then how did that translate? Did you explain something like that to your kids? Because I can't imagine you're not taking that. Maybe not. For me, it's very intentional. I don't know if I'll be quiet, but like the point is, do you do something like that to help kids in the alphas discover? Because I think that's where the focus is. They're all over and they don't know what to go do. And so I don't know.
Yeah.
How are you handling that?
Yeah, it's a challenging question, because especially with kids when they're still kind of searching for their path and what they want to do in life and what they're really love and what they're passionate about. Kids don't always know; they're still kind of like learning it as they go. But the more that they can get exposed to different things, the more that they'll find something. The more opportunity they have to find something that they're really into. So for us, it's been a matter of finding value in trying to build productive behaviors and habits, particularly with the youth. And what that has drifted into a little bit is also even like political realm. So we've found ourselves aligning with organizations that promote, freedom, faith, family, traditional values, and having some of those traditional values underpinning us aligned us with certain community elements that have come in and been part of our community, and then using that as a platform to sort of, well, how do we assess these different things? So it could be a policy, it could be a cultural norm. Let's take the obesity epidemic, for example, and we might say on our podcast, well, how do we want to unpack this? What's happening here? Is it personal responsibility? Is it big government and corruption with food industries? And so we'll try to look at both sides, and what we'll do is we'll argue both sides, and then we come to a conclusion and an opinion. So we're doing a number of things.
You
So
do
we'll
that with
take-
your kids?
Yeah, we do that with the kids, and
Did they do some of the research and other things with that?
They do, yeah.
Besides GPT, are they like Google says, like dive in one layer lower, please?
They do. It's mostly Google searches, but it's at least a start. Like they're looking at both sides. So I'll ask them, for example, okay, one of you research benefits, one of you research drawbacks, and then we're going to come together and we'll record a podcast.
Just one put on the Trump hat, one put on the Harris hat. Like, oh, I got to be Trump this week, or I got to be Harris this week. That's bullshit. And you're like, well, I'm Bertie, I'm Ralph Nader every week. So guys, so that's really sucks for me.
Yes, it's difficult. However, when you can argue the other side, you become such a so much better at debating the issues, because you understand the best points from the other side, even if you don't believe in that. To be able to argue them is so important, and
This is
that
the most
teaches
political this
critical thinking
conversation's ever
skills.
gotten. This is the most political we've ever gotten on the show. I will tell you one thing I think is funny. I don't know where I saw this. I wish I remember. It just said, the door for the bathroom, for gender neutral. It had all kinds of things. It had like a man, it had a woman, it had a man and a woman, like all stick figures though. Like it was like really intentionally, like everyone had boners apparently but they had horses, they had dogs, they had dog on dog. They said, and at the end it's like, we don't actually give a shit. Just wash your hands. That's all it said. It's like it had every version of every animal. A spider was on there, and then people had added stickers of just other things, and it just don't give a shit. Just wash your hands.
Yeah,
that's all.
That's funny.
So,
that's actually
anyway,
really funny.
I think that's the best.
But
one.
it's
I think obesity, by the way, is easy. Stop eating, people.
Well,
it's not. I mean, it's not overcomplicated. Stop eating.
It like a lot of people would say, it's not overcomplicated. It's a matter of
It is when you're far from the problem. It looks easy, but you think at the end of the day, it's you have so many calories you need in a day, and if you take more than that, you'll probably gain weight.
Yeah.
So there's other stuff that triggers that.
Exercise and fuel, but there's more. Let's say there's more complicated topics out there, right? The kids are they're either getting fed or they hear about, and well, how do we understand this? And it could be, you brought up gender. Like gender's a huge topic, right. And so. For me personally, like I want to unpack those issues with my children and not have them unpack it with somebody else somewhere that may
or on YouTube.
Or on YouTube. And so we do some of those challenging topics together. We'll also do fun topics together, like what's better, Fortnite or Minecraft?
No question, neither.
We get to do all of that.
Minecraft bugs me. I don't know why. I can't stand low graphic games. I know it's a little tangent, but if I was going to debate that with you, Fortnite is so repetitive. And it's great for you little young fast finger people, but us PC gamers that are old, and no. So we just buy our way to the top. We get really good hardware, and we're like, I'm just going to outgame you with technology.
That's a good strategy.
At some point, though, with a golf analogy, the better golfer wins. Anyway, I think that's fun too. It's like because you can get into hard topics and have that. I literally think I'd have to do one child at a time, because then to be screaming about who took my line, I was going to say that, and then that'd be the show, is those three arguing. Actually, that might be funny. I'm like, and here's my life, people. I love what you're doing. So,
we definitely have
tell me about. So you're we'll talk about the business of your podcast. So, what are you guys doing on the monetization side? So because you do want to, like, it takes. To be fair, like we monetize from day one. That's not an accurate description though, because I had a channel called AI Nerd. Did it for 2 years during COVID. Monetized it the hard way, which is just put out a bunch of content that was terrible. it was ahead of the AI wave. And so it was frustrating because YouTube would flag you and say, this is deceptive. I'm like, but no, I have access to this thing called open AI. And I had it for like 3 years prior to going public. And so I just got frustrated and honestly just let it go. Cause I was just like, but then I missed the wave. I didn't have but the point is I figured, how to monetize it, but it was a really long, hard path, like the traditional get numbers, get things, downloads. That took 2 years. And that's not with like a lot of the cheats that people do with buying followers and all the shit you should never do, because it's great for a little while. And then we tried that on some channels for some people and it's just like, oh my God, that ruins the channel.
Yes.
Or you get spot spammed. One thing we get with YouTube is we advertise and I see like half of Russia subscribes. I'm like, what the like,
Right.
Like what's going on? Like, and it's frustrating because it wastes money and then it also kills your channel metrics. And so,
yeah.
What are you guys doing though? Just kind of how are you approaching it? Sorry, long-winded way to get to that.
Yeah, no problem. And those are all, I would say, pitfalls people really have to be careful for. You'll get approached if you start a social media channel to buy subscribers.
MD whatever
and it's really dangerous. I would say just do it organically. Like my personal like humble opinion is you got to do it organically. It sounds like that's what's worked for you too. Because then you won't have the engagement. I see channels that have hundreds of thousands of followers, but our channel has like significantly more engagement. Like we get a lot of engagement on our social media, and we get very regular like people downloading our podcasts. And so our podcasts are in the range of about let's see, close to 1,000 downloads per episode. So it's not crazy, but it's not bad.
But that's really, really solid. I mean, it really is.
It depends a little bit on the guest and so forth, but it's pretty good. So we're happy with that. We have we're in the throes of, we've developed over the last several months a media kit, a pricing guide, and we're working with some companies that we would do sponsorships for and ads. And so we're going to start adding that in terms of the monetization strategy. We've also hit the like download and watch hours limit to get some ad revenue within YouTube. So that I don't think is going to be earth-shattering type of money, but as it grows, it could become meaningful. And so we have a few things like that are on the horizon, and that's essentially where we're at. Like we're really have just been trying to like build up the brand enough to where we can talk to sponsors and have a respectable sort of
well, it's funny. So I will say, like, part of the things I present on with this idea of monetization of podcast is I don't have a corporate sponsor. Every one of our sponsors have come from the guests themselves. The fact that you're building a sense of community, I would, as every entrepreneur gets, you get unsolicited advice when you come on the show. So here it comes. I would tell you, focus on the community and your guests to contribute towards this mission. And they don't have to. It's a free show. You will likely get on here at some point if you apply, and we've asked you to. But you get on faster, and there's a whole value offer structure.
Yep.
And what it does is you're building your community through, I'm getting behind them, I'm also getting additional value. So when people sponsor us, we buy ads, we do stuff for the show, we try to promote them on social the best we can.
Right.
The reason you do that, I think, because not only that, you're collecting revenue and you're kind of paying for itself, but it also then gets people more vested in giving you that review and and engaging with those posts that you do, and because they've paid into the idea of it. So a few $100 a show, whatever it is, a few $1,000s a show, whatever people end up you end up doing with your offer is a really smart way to get it on all fronts. Because we don't have thousands of download per show. We also do 300 shows a year, but so if I had that, I would. But you'll get to that Joe Rogan type of a move, because I say that because he is the pinnacle of what people chase, which is corporate sponsors and this and that. But that's a long path for sure. But I think you could monetize in between time, because you already have a community of ideas of people who want to get behind it, or you get them. For us too, it's downstream, right? So a lot of our guests, we run their social media for them. We produce their podcast for them. We have if you're like, oh, I want somebody to go do that for me, we might have a conversation, and that's where we monetize downstream as well as. Nothing's forced, but for you, just figure out what that downstream value would be to get them to, hey, join this mastermind community with us with kids, and you just start bringing small groups, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And
I think, especially like, when we talk about entrepreneurial spirit, one thing that I think you always got to recognize is you don't know what you don't know as much.
You don't know what you don't know.
I'm an engineer. Like I was like building products and stuff. Getting into this is way out of my zone. And so I've had to ask a lot of people for help. I've had to be pretty humble about what we're doing and how we're doing it. And so I would just say, like to your point, like seek help, join a mastermind community, get on school. I think that's another great platform that people
That's
can
where
get
we're doing
on.
our community. It's
Yeah.
interesting about communities. So when you start a community, I'll give you some, since you're asking, you said I don't know about it. And I've never built a community that's like this paid. I will tell you the things that we've gotten in trouble, not trouble with, I've had trouble thinking through is you can't start off and be like, hey, join my community. And there's no content there because you're just not going to have enough to ever justify it. So you do it on Facebook or something, you start micro growing it.
Yep.
But start with your own mastermind, something you can deliver. You could have your own community of a mastermind right now for people who have kids who are Gen Alpha kids who want to help them get better.
Yep.
You could drop 3-4 people who are entrepreneurial nature that have these kids, and now you have the right mastermind to help each other. And that helps your brand, helps them. Like you're talking to lots of people, you know what I mean? Like you have it. And that might be $12,000 of revenue for that, whatever your mastermind time period is for you to facilitate. And then you just go do another one. And the point is that immediately monetizes a community for you. That's very focused, and it benefits everyone in the community as well for you just putting it together. And then you can bring in guests and you can drive the things you need to do to add value to the conversation. But that's one way. That's how we're doing it, and it's working. Like I would love for you to come in as a podcast mastermind artist because you're going to learn all that. Then you'll bring in the people who are, and then now you have people reviewing and looking at your show and giving you advice from that you never would get. Like you would never get that feedback, right? Because you just that escapes when you're out of the corporate world. You get zero feedback for what you're doing unless you go out and almost pay for it. So anyway,
yeah, exactly. Or you get you look at comments on Instagram or one of these.
Even then, though, it's usually, like it's not like if I looked at your show, right? If we're in a mastermind, I'm held accountable because we have a pay it now mentality. You give me an hour of your time, I'll give you an hour of mine. And I go listen to your show and I take significant notes and I run it through my prompts of AI to say, hey, what would be better here? We do the things we do. You will improve your show. You will improve a way of thinking about monetizing. Or here's our offers. This is the funnel we run, right? You'd be like, fuck, that really helps. I don't have to think through any of that shit. It's super valuable to be in something where someone's already accomplished something or they have a niche of something that can help you. I cannot recommend it enough. Like it really does help.
Right. Agreed.
Anybody out there, like get into something that's going to help you, but you have to add value to it as well. I think that's the other thing. Yeah. What up? What's next for you? So, this, by the way, I want to be very clear. Shameless plug, GSD Nation. You got to check it out. It's the podcast name though is Programming Lions. Is that correct?
Lions. So on any of the audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, you can just search up Programming Lions, and you'll find our podcast.
Do you do it live, or do you just release at 8 a.m.
We just release it. So we record them in advance, and there's some with a couple of youngsters. Sometimes they'll get off script, and so we want to keep it nice and tidy. And so we'll edit them down. But we have been doing more live shows. So we've been doing weekly live sessions on social media with the kids, where we'll do some of these exercises, like I just mentioned, and we're toying around with it. This is another thing I would say is like experimentation is good. You learn what works and what doesn't work. But right now we're experimenting with a little series we call Bucket, Let's Debate. And so I got a bucket with ideas in it, and we'll draw one of those out, and then the kids will debate on these on a live session, and we'll have questions come in and things like that. So.
I like that bucket.
That's a great, like if you think about like what kind of muscle that creates in a youngster in terms of being able to take a topic that you're not ready for and you don't know what side you're going to get of it and then try to debate it.
I love it. I mean, I'm listening to yours thinking, man, I have two kids that are very articulate and opinionated and completely unreasonable at times because they're 13 and 10. And I'm thinking, man, they would be fantastic. This leads me to my next piece, which is where I wouldn't probably, it supports the wrong word. Have the approval is my wife would be like, you're not putting them on. So you tell me about the boss, the real boss behind this.
Yeah, that's actually a huge risk in terms of what we're doing. And it's something we thought very, very carefully and long about, and we continue to revisit it frequently because the online community, social media is super toxic, and that's the best way I can say it. Is it super toxic? And so the amount
real
of
trolls,
like gross hate, trolls, disgusting things people will say if they don't agree with you or they don't like what you did, or they're just they just get off on being mean. So that is, and then you're putting your child's face out in the ether for eternity. And so they're creating this digital footprint. So these are all things that we really did weigh carefully, but ultimately came to the conclusion that like it's worth the risk to start helping them to build a brand, and ultimately they're going to have a digital footprint of some nature or
Right.
another, and we'd at least rather have it tied to our value system and our channel. But
Well,
it's
I agree
tricky.
with you. I think what you're doing, by the way. So I want to be very clear. If I didn't have to have my face ever on social media, I would not. And
Right.
that might sound like that's ridiculous. You're all everything. I have to be because I've somehow become the brand of what I'm trying to do, and I didn't want to. I want to be in the background watching money come in. I want to be SimCity guy sitting over the thing, not
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I mean. Like that's there's two types of people, two types of SimCity players. I'm going to ask you this question before I go on the next one. It's those who like to build shit,
Yeah.
and then they start messing stuff and it goes apart and they go build another city, or those who just like to make it as tweaked and perfect and operationally as fine as possible.
Yeah.
Which are you?
I'm absolutely the builder. I think there are people that have better expertise in the tweaking, and you put them
That's
in place.
defines who's going to be an entrepreneur and who is going to go run a business
Right.
or work. Anyway, 100% agree. Oh, it's fun. Next, let's try to get these cities. Now they're all
Yeah,
fucked
but
up.
there are people that enjoy that. Like for me personally, it's just not something I enjoy. I always enjoyed either creating something or fixing something that's completely messed up. So if it's a
Running it,
disaster,
no.
it's kind of like building something anyway. So if something is broken and you can fix it, that's really fun and rewarding. Maybe it's like the engineer and the technical side of me. But there are people that are very good at maintaining the machine. So if you've created the machine, they're good at going in and tuning and all those like little tiny efficiencies. And there are people that are really good at that. And so I think it's another good point for an entrepreneur is if you can be self-aware and recognize when that time comes. Like you built something, but maybe you need to hire a good operations person to manage the flow and then work on building something else that can complement what you've built before, because otherwise you're just going to be miserable, right? Doing what you're not
Exactly.
passionate about.
Well, it's and coming backwards, I wouldn't have my digital footprint out there if I didn't honestly have to. Unless like, but the point is, these kids are going to have some digital footprint to some degree, and I actually believe if they learn how to maintain a brand and say, "Hey, I was doing this," these become differentiators actually for them in the future.
Yes.
So I think what you're doing, like, it's no one's going to get it perfect, but the truth is, then they're aware that I have a brand, so they're like, "Hey, listen, I don't think I want to have me shotgun this beer at 15 years old because holy cow, if that ends up in social media, my dad's going to kill me and I'm not going to be able to get to do the show anymore." And if you're like clear with them, listen, if you screw up in your brand, you're going to have to exit the show for a while
Yeah.
because, or whatever it'll be like. So you're giving them conscious and tied to value as opposed to some kind of, oh, I'll lose my phone for a week. Like, no, you may not get a job ever. Like, right. Like
Yeah.
So I think what you're doing is showing them and you're getting them out there and you're not forcing it. If they didn't want to be there though, you wouldn't have them there. If they're like, I want to be an influencer, you're like, well, then let's get you. This is how you become an influencer. You just don't declare it. You could,
Yeah.
I guess, but
Yeah.
this is how you do it. You start talking on topics and you learn how to hold conversations and people start watching you and listening to you. And that's when you start having influence.
Yeah.
And I think what you're doing is, you're ahead of it because they're going to be there anyway. I guess is my point. Not everybody, but if they have a desire to be on YouTube, they're going to your attention goes where your eyes go,
Yeah.
right? So I don't know. Is that part of what came into your factoring when you were talking with your wife? Like they already want to be there. We might as well
Yeah.
help,
We
not
may as well put
control it,
some
influence
guardrails
it, I
on
guess.
it and help them
Yeah.
versus seeing what they do on their own. And so I think it's important that a parent is along them with them, guiding them on what
On the
they do.
guardrails. So I can't imagine this kid's not like, well, Dad, I want to go the entrepreneurial ADD that fires out of them. How are you roping that in on them to keep them from
Yeah,
doing
I
stuff on
mean,
their own too soon?
kid in the social media sphere, kids will see things like, yeah, like people reacting or posting cats on skateboards, and um, that's not really creating value. It's like it's taking something funny and putting it out. And there's entertainment value perhaps, but I don't know that creates long-term value. And so that's something we talk about is like, we need to create long-term value. It doesn't mean we can't put out a cat on skateboard and maybe do a reaction to it once in a while. But if that's all we do,
Right.
then what are we really creating? Are we really creating anything? And so that's what sort of tied us to this mission of building like conservative values within Gen Alpha so that they can be resilient and strong and carry the next generation, which has a lot stacked against us. And and so it's important that kids understand how the world works and get entrepreneurial skills, understand the financial literacy and competency that they don't learn in school. So those are all things that we go through.
How do you like? You guys are on Rumble. How do you like that channel from a social media standpoint? And you're on the conservative side, so I think that's a conservative channel.
Yes. Yes.
And to be clear, I don't typically identify anyway. I would say I'm like most of the principles of conservatism. I don't like extremes on any of them, like where they're. I don't like if the less you polarizing for marketing, I get, but in actuality, polarizing does not help anyone in the long term. But
I think anybody reasonable is more in the middle now.
Right.
Like
people
let's
go reasonable with your own strong beliefs. I can go with that.
Exactly. People that watch some of our short form material, reels and shorts and so forth, would probably say that we're right wingers or whatever. But that is
well, there's some groups. If you're not far left, you are always right, and there's other groups. If you're not far right, you're left.
Yes.
And I argue to both of you, you're on a circle. And if you go far enough, you're going to flip over to the others.
Yes, that's true. Actually, yes. Yes.
Love and hate are very close. You just got to. It's a long path to get to the other.
It's a difficult business in that realm, because like people don't necessarily like, they want to be sort of they want to be in one of the tribes, right? They want to be on the left or the right. And so sometimes if you are in the middle and your content shows more middle, like, oh, well, here's where we agree, then you just don't get anybody that really attaches to your community or your brand. And so you do have to make some bold statements. It doesn't mean you have to have bold statements on everything, but on certain things, yes. And then people know like who they're with. Like they have an idea.
It's frustrating that I suffer from this exact thing. This is actually one of the content strategy pieces I really suffer with is, unfortunately, political alignment really drives content.
It does.
Displacement. And it does for, like, look at Grant Cardone for his entrepreneurs. Like, people are leveraging these polarizing topics. And I got to tell you, in my own personality, I'm definitely more of a moderator type. I do that well. Like, I'm good at bringing people together, let them say their asshole or funny things. And okay, what about this? And that is more my personality. So for me and I got to tell you, like, if people listen, he's spot on. If you really, a guy I know, his name's Kyle Ray's. He owns like they've done like 100 million plus views on LinkedIn, because he owns the police network channel. Okay. And he just, gets kicked off LinkedIn every other week. Right. But he does like 15 posts a day, and he's so far right. It's like literally one more second he's left. He's like, it's so far. But he kills it, and his business does great, because he only says, I only work with highly conservative, conservatives. Like, if you're anywhere liberal, I'd have no interest in working with you. Yeah. Zero. Yeah. And he's so far right, and he defines it that way, and he kills it.
Yeah. Well, it is.
I could never do that.
You essentially, you take potentially half the population out of your total market assessment when you do that, but there's still a huge market there, and I think you mentioned that's a great example. Grant Cardone's another great example that has been.
He mixes Scientology with. He mixes all the ones that you could possibly mix, and you want to see like we're gonna go right. We're gonna go use some of the cult-like behaviors of that. We're gonna do. I was like, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, he's bold, but I guess the one thing about that, and this is maybe another social media tip, is he's genuine. I think he's genuine and authentic when he puts his ideas out there. He doesn't care. Like, he doesn't care what you think of him. He's just putting it out there. And so I do think you have to be authentic in what you say and what you believe.
Exactly, because you'd be uncomfortable if you were saying that stuff just for attention. Yeah, you would also, those guys, by the way, too, Grant, those other guys, like they can argue the other point, and then they have their own counterpoint. Like what you originally go back to what we were saying is they understand the positions of the people who oppose them, and they know what their positions are to offset that. And then the ones where they know they're probably ridiculous, they know how to divert the conversation. They're very good at it. Like anybody, like from either side of any alignment. Another polarizing way you can do things is I only work with men. Like, I only work with women. That's a slightly different piece. You can't say I only work with white people or I only work with black people. Well, actually, black people can actually say I only really work with black-owned plays. Yeah. White people could never do that. Right. Native Americans can do that. Like, but there's you have to watch sometimes on those other big ones like race and other things like that. But if you were like, I only work with white men, like, then you're gonna get labeled. Sorry, it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's not a label.
Even our conservatives like, dude, no,
Yeah,
that's too far.
That's too far.
Wow, shut it. You don't want to. What are you doing? No, you must be a liberal. Get out of here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anyway. Crazy.
Do you worry sometimes the kids? What happens if the kids come in and they're like, Dad, you got the like? Would you welcome that if they were like they flip the script on you to? They're they want to move to California and live in a box or something. I don't know what do you do if your kids are like, we're moving to California, Dad? I want to pay 11% income tax to state and be broke, not have water.
Well,
we're going to California, people.
We've covered tax a lot, and so they know the difference we pay between Arizona and
California.
You're like, but they do disagree with me on things. We get a lot of people come in and say, "Oh, you're indoctrinating your children. You're forcing them to believe what you believe." Well, actually,
all parents do. Next question.
Yes, like parents do have a bias, and you raise kids to your value system. So I certainly have a bias in that, but I think I'm doing my kids a huge service, which is like I'm exposing them to. I mean, you could look at this as a service, but I'm exposing them to the internet, so we get feedback about our ideas, and then we're talking to guests on both sides of the aisle of different ideas. So we are definitely exploring different sides and facets of the of what's going on, but we don't agree on it. Like there's a number of things that we don't fully agree on, and that's fun because then we can like really dig deep into it, and I'll explain why I'm on this side of a topic and why they're on this side. But what I normally find is interesting with kids, their instinctual morality about things and their instincts about what's right and wrong in terms of whether it's personal responsibility or whatever, they lean typically further right than I do on topics. Like they think they believe strongly in accountability, personal responsibility, the beauty of life, belief and faith, and I'm a little more like, well, we should compromise on some things, right? Like, and so I find that fascinating actually about children that haven't been maybe conditioned to think another way yet. That's my
well, and part of your upbringing too. So if you're of abundance, you'll be of an abundance mindset, which typically will make you in this more of like, I think accountability kind of, hey, listen, because you have a set of I have, and I can then see that. I think a lot of there is a flip side of that where you come from scarcity, nothingness, and you always feel like you're being victimized because you see everyone around you have shit and you're on the internet and it makes it 10 times worse. And so the mentality of that is only broken through a mentor typically, or just an innate, fuck that, I'm going to own my own world and I'm breaking out of whatever the shitstorm I'm in. And that doesn't happen very often because it's just because you are nurtured into whatever it is. Your own circumstances do influence that 100%. Yeah. And I think the things that you're doing is, if you can flip somebody, they can like say, hey, listen, they can at least have enough awareness for their kids to be like, you can't blame yourself. You got to get out of this. Like, listen, we blamed him. It's probably too late for us parents, but this guy, if you could influence a handful of people to do that flip the accountability button or the sense of entitlement buttons for the shitty situations they're in, you've done your job as an entrepreneur. I mean, if that was your only mission of this is just to get people to be more accountable. Yeah. You win. That's a win. That's a winning formula.
You're 100% right, and not all kids have exposure to that, and so that's part of what we do with bringing on some of our guests. Like we've had guests on that are incredible. They've gone through horrible things. Been raised without a father in high crime areas, been in prison, and then like how did you get through that? Like what was that like? Why did you feel like this? And now why why do you feel this way? And so I think exposing kids to like that is important, and different people go through different adversities in life, and my kids certainly have started out on a in a let's say a more favorable position, but it doesn't mean that they can't still learn and expose other people to good ideas so that we can all be better collectively.
Right. And I love what you're doing here. And so I see guys like you, and I get inspired. One thing I think I love, I'm taking from this conversation. I know we're over just a little bit. Just this is, you and I have similar paths on a different. Like I would have, I think, loved to have done what you've done. I just don't think in our family dynamics it would work that way, right? Like it's different. And but I love to bring them in. I'd rather introduce them to something I know they're going to go to anyway, and not make it something they covet. Like think about alcohol use. It's like I'd rather give them a beer at 13, so it's not a big deal to have a beer. Now I don't want you drinking beer because you get fat and you get love handles, and that's probably a bigger issue than you having a beer. I'd rather have you do that than vape. Fair enough. I mean, anyway, the point is, None of my kids are drinking, by the way, just to be clear. Just I'm saying it's more representative and metaphoric. Just,
You don't want to get flagged now on
CPS come into my house. If it was California, they'd already taken the kids from school and they'd be living in Mexico.
Right.
But I'm saying that on anyway. The point is, I love what you're doing with that, and I look at like even our own show and our own entrepreneurial spirit, and I see guys like you, and I see what you're doing. It's inspiring because it's kind of like, yeah, I got to find a more polarizing. Where do I actually believe? And does that fit to my skill sets personally? And how do I translate that to my guests? And I keep falling back on, I'm a better moderator than I am anything. And so it's like, well, then go fucking moderate everything. Yeah. Oh, I cussed. I've got to get that on YouTube. Oops. It's at the end. YouTube won't, the algorithm at some point goes, I'm not even listening anymore. It's done.
For sure. I think if you have a vision and you want to do something, don't be silly, but get prepared and take the leap and get your head down. Don't be afraid to like put things out earlier than you feel comfortable. And then you just got to grind at it. You got to grind at it, be consistent. And and if you have a vision, if you can see it in your mind, like where this is going, then it's there. It's there. You just have to manifest it now into existence. And it's just a matter of then work, consistency, finding a good mentor, and making it happen. Like anybody can make anything happen. I really believe it. Like,
I believe you're spot on. And the mentoring piece, I think, is a good thing to end on. Of in 2025, I know the first mastermind that we're launching this year is around podcasting. We'll talk off camera about that. Those are the mentors I want, are people that are in the spot, and that the idea of passion, proficiency, and impact. Like, this is what we all love to do. This is what we're good at. How can we help each other get better? Because I think that's the kind of mentoring I think is most effective when you have people that are in the journey, are in different roads, different lengths, and you come together to really like, man, I learned a ton from them, and I learned a ton from this group, and I really got a lot out of it. If you're not in those things, you have to get into one, but you got to pick the ones that make sense for whatever your goal is. So for you, then maybe the final question is 2025. What is you fast forward a year and you're looking back, what are you happy you accomplished?
Well, I think we've monetized our channel. We are making a narrow profit. I think we've expanded our community by at least 2x of where we're at today. I'd also expect that we have partnered with a couple of organizations in the same sphere to where we're collaborating or we're contributors to their causes. And I expect that my children, who are largely like the podcasters or the talent on the show, have built more and more skills and confidence to where they're sharper, they're more articulate, they can describe both sides of issues and topics and be a lot more engaging for our audience. So I just think there's a lot of like sharpness that's going to come, but also growth.
Yeah, that's great. I really appreciate you coming on today. GSD-Nation.com. Do you have a specific ask of the, who should get on the show, like, or what are you looking for? What's the call to action? What's the throwaway question?
Call to action. I would just say check us out. Get engaged with our community. Our website is GSD-Nation.com, and if you want to check out a lot of our content, we're on Instagram under my GSD Nation, and you'll see a big orange G, and that's us. And check out our content, and then look up Programming Alliance podcast on Apple, Spotify. And give us some feedback, and I hope you can join us on this journey of building a productive Gen Alpha.
Love it. Thank you, by the way, for jumping here today. I'm going to put you in the periwinkle room. I'll be back. We'll talk here in a second. But thank you so much. Thank you, Matt, so much for joining today. Listen, GSD-Nation, he's helping Gen Alpha, to get going, start doing, and start, being really good. I think it's going to be a really good generation of people who adding productivity. Specifically, we didn't get to cover this, but I think because there's a generation ahead of them that just got thrown in this technology and doesn't know what to do, and then they're already struggling from the work. And this next group coming in is going to learn from the millennial group that's in front of them, because that's the parents and the Xers. And so I think our kids, the Gen X kids, the Alphas, the late Zs, are going to be solid. They're going to be the next. Oh my God, that's a Gen X, or they're a Gen Alpha, because they're gonna have a lot more tools, and they're coming into a world full of potential productivity value and AI and other stuff that's coming on, and they're gonna grow up in it and live in it. And I love what Matt's doing, because it's he's preparing them for it, and he's doing his part of it. And so check out the podcast and GSD-Nation. I'll put up one more time. For those who are listening, still here, you guys rock. I really do appreciate anybody who watches the whole show, or even just jumps on for a few moments. But support the channel. Go to YouTube and subscribe at Never Been Promoted. And until we meet again, get out there, go unleash your entrepreneur by cutting a tie to something holding you back.